Phoenix Knight here. Welcome to the channel, and welcome to Mystical Munchies, featuring the official World of Warcraft cookbook. After we cooked the side last week, cornmeal biscuits, they turned out to be a touch dry, but they were pretty good. This week we're on to the entree, crunchy spider surprise. First up, let's tell the story. The surprise comes when, with a look of delighted satisfaction, happy customers ask you what it is. But seriously, one should only use spider meat when there are absolutely no better options. So this recipe substitutes crab to get the same culinary crunch with less ew factor. Designed by a master chef tasked with feeding blood elf royalty on a budget, this recipe will surprise and delight those with even the most discerning palates. Looking at this recipe, I'm not sure it's going to make enough to be considered an entree, but we'll find out soon enough. As usual, the ingredients are waiting for us at the table, so let's head in that direction. For this recipe, we need an egg, which I've already separated. Here's the egg right here. The recipe calls for, I believe, 8 ounces of wonton wrappers, which was an adventure to find at the grocery store this morning, but I managed. A pound of crab meat or imitation crab. I'm using imitation crab. Teaspoon each of salt and sugar. A tablespoon of cornstarch. A pinch each of black and red peppers. I'm using a half teaspoon for both of those. And then oil for frying, which is what I've got right here. With all the ingredients set up, let's move into the kitchen and start putting this recipe together. The first thing we're going to do as part of this recipe is we're going to take the egg white that we separated from the egg yolk earlier. We're going to splash a little bit of water in here. That's probably a bit more than a splash, but oh well. Then we're going to beat that for a few seconds. What we're doing right with this is we're creating an egg wash that we can actually put aside. We can actually put that aside for the time being. So that's our egg wash. That's ready to go. We'll need that later. Next, recipe as written, they want you to slice the wonton wrappers into very thin strips. But since I've had problems in the past with... Probably should have checked the date on these. But since I've had problems in the past with making things too small, and I'm looking at you, Deadpool's chimichanguitas, on that score, where is my access point for this recipe? Or for this package of wonton wrappers? I might have just have to cut these things open. Well, fortunately in the kitchen, I'm never far from a pair of scissors. That'll work. So I'm going to make a modification with these wonton wrappers once I get into them. Okay, these are probably my first time ever handling wonton wrappers, and I definitely don't like how thin they are. That's making me very nervous. Actually, maybe they're not... maybe they're not as thin as I was expecting, but I was expecting to have... I was expecting them to be longer sheets, but I can probably work with this as is. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, recipe as intended. They want you to cut these into thin strips, but since they're actually coming out more what I expected them to be, what I expected them to be was basically a long sheet like that, where I was going to have to cut them in half, and that's what I was going to do to be able to handle them more easily. But since they're like that, I think I'm just going to take a few of these out. This is about the size I want them to be anyway, so I got very lucky on that front. I'm going to grab... The recipe says it's supposed to make a dozen balls, so I'm going to start off with a dozen wonton wrappers. Let's see, we've got 3, 4, 5. I'm going to lift these up carefully so I don't tear them since they are very thin. There we are. 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm mostly getting these on a plate so I can get them somewhat, so I can keep everything somewhat organized. 10, 11, 12. Okay, cool. So now I can put these in. Put these in a plastic bag and put these back in the fridge. Actually, they're probably, looking at the use by date, the rest of these might just hit the bin because I doubt I'm going to use them for anything after this, and certainly not in time. So those can go in the fridge. That piece of wrapper can hit the bin. The knife can get put back away since I didn't end up actually needing it. Then the wonton wrappers can get set aside as well, and we'll come back with the food processor in shop. Unlike last time when we used the food processor, I remembered to put a blade in first thing, so we're not going to have that problem again. In the food processor, we're going to start off with our crab meat, which in this case, like I said, I'm using imitation crab for that. If I can ever get the... There we go. I was trying to get the plastic zip to separate. Try to break it up just a little bit. Just to make it somewhat easier on the food processor. Right. Then we've got a second package of that because remember, we needed a pound of crab meat. So that's what I've got right here. Once again, it is not wanting to separate for me, which is kind of annoying. Come on, there we got it. Took a little bit. Okay. Breaking up the crab meat a little bit more. So the crab meat, I'm going to wash my hands before I start handling everything else. So we've got the crab meat. Now we're going to go for the salt and sugar. We need a teaspoon of each. There's the sugar. Break this up a little bit. There we are. Teaspoon of sugar, which can go back up. Actually, the crab meat packaging can also hit the bin at this point. Salt. Which can also go back up. Then we want the tablespoon of cornstarch, which I've got my cornstarch right here. I'm going to use a half tablespoon twice because half times 2 is 1. And hey, look at that. I can do 3rd grade. Actually, that's probably like 4th or 5th grade math where you're trying to multiply fractions. But in any case, I was able to get a hold of it pretty easily. Right, so that's the cornstarch. That can hit the bin as well. And we're going to use half a teaspoon each of coarse black pepper and crushed red pepper. Here's our crushed red pepper that we're putting in as well. And I believe the last thing we need is the egg yolk. Alright, so that can move over there. Find the lid for the food processor. Now the food processor is actually fairly loud, so here's your 5-second warning before I start to turn it on. And what we're looking for here is we're going to combine this until it's completely mixed. So once again, another 5-second warning. Just give it a quick check. Maybe I'll hit it a little more. I warned you guys that was loud. So now I'll give your ears a little bit of time to recover before we move into the next step. Next, we're going to take a spoon and we're going to scoop out portions of the crab mixture to form balls that are about 2 inches across. So let's see what we can do here. Maybe a little bit more. That might not close actually when we get it onto, well, we'll see how it does. So now that we've got our first ball of crab meat, now we're going to dip it in the egg wash. Rattle it around in there. Then I'm going to put it on one of the wonton wrappers. Might be a little bit hard to see what I'm doing, so let me bring the wonton wrappers in shot. Then I'm going to bring these up. Yeah, that's not going to close. I'm going to need to make this next one. This one's it's too late for this one, but I'm going to need to make them a little bit smaller. I'm just putting this one on parchment paper, so let me see how the next one goes. That one seems like it's going to be a lot more likely to close. So we'll dip that in the egg wash. I'll bring it to the next wrapper. Oh yeah, that should close. Well, maybe not. Maybe I spoke too soon. Well, no. I think we're fine here, but my sneaking suspicion is this isn't going to make enough to be considered an entree. We'll pinch the sides of that to try to keep it together. Then I'll make the rest of those off shot, and we'll come back we'll come back when this is done. Here's the results of what we were doing with the crab meat and the wonton wrappers. As you can see, I had a little bit of trouble with a few of these on the sizes. I should have knocked some of these down, but I did get a nice round number of 16, whereas the recipe normally calls for 12. Right now I've got the oil heating up and we're defaulting to 350 as usual. So I think we're going to come back waiting for the oil to heat up. We'll come back when that's a little closer to temperature. But meantime, I'm going to get caught up on some of these dishes behind me. I got so caught up in dishes and working on other things today that the oil almost came up to temperature. But that's the beauty of some of these recipes where you have to wait for... Actually, here's your any second warning about the thermometer going off. That's the beautiful thing about a lot of these recipes that build in... There's the thermometer going off. You zip it. We'll let that clean out. The probe can go straight into the dishes. And that can all get unplugged. As I was saying, that's the beautiful thing about these recipes that build in whether it's baking times or oil heating times. I can usually turn around and get caught up on other things. Now, since the oil's at temperature, and I don't particularly feel like putting my hands in hot oil, I didn't exactly sign up for the hot oil package today. We're going to use tongs to drop some of the crunchy spider surprise into the oil. Whoa. Okay, looks like that's going to hold. We can probably drop a few more of those in. And that first one just came completely apart. I was kind of afraid of that happening. Plus, it didn't help that it flipped over. It didn't help that the first one flipped over going right into the oil. But I do want to get a plate ready with some paper towel on it so that when these come out of the oil, I've got somewhere I can plate them to. So we're trying to get them to where the wonton wrappers, normally it would be the strips recipe as written, but remember, I'm not doing the strips part until the wrappers are crispy and the crab is cooked on the inside. Let me look at this one because this one just came completely apart. No, it looks like the crab mostly stayed on that one, but yeah, that first one completely flipped on me. So that, I was afraid that one was going to come out. I'm not going to classify that as a botch for an eventual redo episode, though. So there's not going to be anything like that on this recipe, I don't think. I don't think that'll impact the recipe at all, just because it'll be a stylistic thing on that particular wonton. Let me just turn that. Let's see if I can turn that without the crab coming out. Looks like it's holding. Push them all under a little bit just to try to get them crispy. And of course that one flipped right back over. Not that I'm surprised by that in the least. I guess gravity's a thing. Who knew? All right, we'll probably give those about another minute or two. About another 30 seconds, and then we can probably get this first batch out. Probably a bit more oil than I wanted to use too, but as long as it's not splashing everywhere, I'm not too worried about it. Okay. We should be able to lift this first batch out completely. I'm feeling that these are, bring the plate to the oil phoenix. You're going to have a lot better results if you do it that way rather than trying to bringing the wontons to the plate. Yeah, I think these first few can come out. This one definitely can come out. Pour some of the oil off. Okay. We'll lift those out and I'll bring the next batch in. Okay, we'll get the next batch in ready to go. Hopefully these won't flip. I can probably put one more, yeah. Alright, I'm not going to bore you with the cooking of the rest of these, but that's the general idea, where you want to wait until, oh yeah, that is definitely crispy, and I'm sure the inside of that one's cooked. So, I'm going to cook the rest of these up in batches. Then we'll take a quick look at how the finished product looks. Then we'll head over to my desk for the taste test. Here's what all the wontons look like when we're all done. I was giving them some time to cool while I was also catching up on dishes. And the stock pot that I had the oil in is going to be a while to clean as well. But everything looks great here. So let's say I played a couple of these, and I'll meet you guys over at my desk for the taste test. I'm just about done with cleanup in the kitchen, but we've got a few of the crunchy spider surprise here ready to go. So let's give this a taste and see what I think. I'm going to take from the one that flipped on me. Surprisingly, it still held. I was very worried that when it flipped on me, the crab was going to come completely apart. And actually, I want to put this in my Weight Watchers app before I forget. So let me just get that taken care of. Sorry, I'm just putting this in my Weight Watchers app. Do that, and I think we're good there. So, let's give this a taste and see what I think. Definitely a little bit of kick from the 2 peppers, and I probably put in more than the recipe called for, but it seemed like it needed it. It was actually kind of a welcome kick. As I've mentioned in the past before, spicy food and I normally do not get along at all, but I think here it's kind of welcome. It just seemed a little, I don't know, with the added kick, it was actually really good. I think without that extra kick, it probably would have been a little bit on the blah side. But it's also been ages since I've had crispy crab wontons, so... And I did used to like those back in the day, even if they were a lot of work. Having regular crab meat rather than the imitation crab, and I'm starting to notice the after kick as well. The regular crab meat, like you'd pick through for cartilage, bones, and stuff like that, wouldn't have really made a difference because you're processing that all in the food processor anyway, but that's another episode of Mystical Munchies in the books. Next week, we're finishing with the dessert, Dalaran Brownie. Thank you for watching the video. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn on notifications so you get my content. Be well, stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and I'll be back with more videos in the future. Until then, take care everyone. Thank you.